So here's what had been happening for months leading up to this afternoon. A quiet campaign had been running behind the velvet curtains of Buckingham Palace. Systematic, calculated, relentless. The objective was simple but incredibly dangerous. Elevate the Queen's bloodline into spaces strictly reserved for those who've sworn their lives to serve the state. Camilla's family, bit by bit, inch by inch, was being normalized as part of the working machinery of the crown, and the people orchestrating this understood exactly what they were doing. The master of the household's office spends weeks calibrating the seating chart for Royal Ascot. This isn't party planning, it's a mathematically precise operation with zero margin for error. Every placement, every gap between chairs, sends a deliberate message about who currently shoulders the burden of representing the nation. Get it wrong, and you've just broadcast the wrong hierarchy to the world. For this specific afternoon, those premier front row seats had been allocated to the hardest working members of King Charles's family, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. These are individuals who've sacrificed decades of private life to grinding, unglamorous state service. Year after year, they show up without complaint. They don't do it for applause or camera flashes. They're the permanent gears keeping the monarchy turning through crisis and stability alike. Their seats in that box directly reflect that lifetime of sacrifice. To take their chairs is to declare open war on the unspoken rules of the House of Windsor. Yet as the clock ticked down to the senior royal's arrival, the unthinkable walked right through those heavy oak doors. Tom Parker Bowles strode past bewildered security details, leading a trailing entourage of extended family members. He didn't glance at the meticulously printed seating charts displayed in the foyer, didn't pause to consult the protocol officers stationed at the thresholds. His stride was confident, unbothered, the walk of a man operating under the absolute belief that he was untouchable. He bypassed his designated area entirely. His actual assigned seats were located in the private non-working guest section at the rear of the enclosure. Perfectly respectable position for a civilian guest attending a state-adjacent function. Instead, he marched in a direct line for the premier tier, the very front row, the exact airspace allocated to the king's own flesh and blood. Stay with me here, because this was no accident. This was a visual power grab engineered to be captured by the world's media the moment the races commenced. If Tom was photographed sitting comfortably among the senior working royals, the international narrative would shift instantly. The global public would begin viewing him as a core figure of the institution, someone who could speak for the sovereign. The visual hierarchy of the British state would be rewritten in a single afternoon, and the calculation didn't originate with Tom alone. The invisible authority guiding him toward those premier seats belonged to Queen Camilla. She had quietly bypassed the standard administrative channels of the palace. Operating entirely in the shadows, she'd issued secret back-channel directives to the household staff, demanding her children be elevated ahead of the king's own siblings. Massive overreach of power, leveraging her new title to secure a permanent visible legacy for her own family. The immediate result was absolute administrative paralysis. Dozens of highly trained courtiers, major generals, communication directors, all of them watched in disbelief. They stood frozen as the civilian entourage claimed the most heavily protected and symbolic real estate in British high society. The staff suddenly found themselves holding two completely incompatible sets of instructions. The official sovereign-approved seating plan, calibrated weeks ago, and the Queen's secret contradictory orders, issued at the 11th hour. They were watching a hostile takeover happen in slow motion. Civilian guests were physically occupying chairs belonging to people who'd given their entire existence to institutional duty. The room's energy turned toxic within seconds. Security radios clipped to protection officers' belts began humming with frantic, hushed whispers. The rigid schedule of the day threatened to unravel completely. The creeping normalization of the Queen's family was about to achieve its crowning visual victory. All they had to do was sit down, refuse to move, and wait for the television cameras to start broadcasting their presence to the world. Tom settled into the premier seat, his entourage fanned out beside him, confidently claiming their stolen territory. He genuinely believed the coup was successful. believed the invisible shield of his mother's immense new power would protect him from any consequences. He assumed the courtiers were far too polite, far too terrified of upsetting the Queen, to dare cause a public scene in front of arriving guests. He was entirely wrong. What Tom Parker Bowles failed to realize in that fleeting moment of triumph was that the core machinery of the monarchy doesn't run on sentimentality or blended family warmth. It runs on cold, unyielding military discipline. He thought he'd outsmarted the polite protocol officers in their pristine morning suits. Thought the traditional rules of the firm no longer applied to him. But his bold movements were already being closely monitored by someone who didn't care in the slightest about his maternal connections. Someone who answered to a much higher, far more ruthless authority within the palace walls. From the deep shadows of the private corridors, an iron figure began moving purposefully toward the front row. The ambient noise in the room seemed to drop into dead, suffocating silence. The man who emerged from those wood-paneled shadows was not a diplomat, not a public relations manager trained to soothe bruised egos. He was an uncompromising instrument of the sovereign's will. Major Tom Thompson, King Charles's highly respected, ultra-disciplined equerry, a military veteran whose entire career was built on precise execution of orders and unbreakable loyalty to the crown. He didn't operate on the currency of social climbing. He operated on protocol, and protocol is utterly merciless. As Thompson closed the distance between the private corridors and the premier seating area, his eyes locked onto the civilian entourage, making themselves comfortable in spaces reserved for the working bloodline of the British state. He recognized the breach instantly. This wasn't a minor logistical error. This was a catastrophic assault on the entire system governing who represents the monarchy. The major's posture was rigid, his approach completely silent. He stopped precisely 2 feet from where Tom Parker Bowles was seated, radiating the kind of icy, unyielding authority that cannot be taught in a boardroom. Think about the psychological pressure of that exact moment. On one side, you have a man buoyed by the intoxicating proximity of his mother's new absolute power. On the other side, an iron pillar of enforcement who stared down actual combat. Thompson didn't raise his voice, didn't create a theatrical scene. He leaned in just enough to be heard over the low murmur of the gathering elite, and he delivered a single devastating piece of information. He informed Tom that his assigned seat was located in the private non-working guest section at the rear of the royal box. Reasonable, straightforward, merely pointing out the objective reality of the official seating chart. What followed was the exact opposite of reasonable. Tom Parker Bowles didn't quietly accept the correction, didn't apologize for the supposed mix-up. Instead, he launched into a fierce, aggressive tirade that shattered the refined atmosphere of the enclosure, his face flushed with sudden hot indignation. Witnesses standing mere feet away watched in absolute paralyzed horror as the Queen's civilian son began loudly questioning the competence of a decorated military officer. Tom openly insulted Thompson's professional credentials, shouted that the equerry simply didn't know how to do his job, accused the major of actively disrupting the logistical safety of the venue by creating completely unnecessary friction. Now, watch this, because what happens next reveals exactly what this infiltration was truly about. In the middle of his tirade, Tom played the hand that exposed everything. He loudly declared that the seating change had been personally ordered by the Queen, looked the senior equerry dead in the eye, and warned that Thompson was committing a career-ending blunder by daring to oppose her will. Let's pause on that. A civilian, a culinary writer, with zero constitutional authority, telling a senior military veteran that his career is over because he dared to uphold the official laws of the king's household. That's the mentality of someone who firmly believes he has sovereign backing to crush anyone standing in his way. Tom wasn't asking for a favor, he was demanding submission. He fully expected the major to visibly shrink, apologize profusely, and back away into the shadows to save his own livelihood. But Major Thompson didn't shrink, didn't blink. He stood there like an immovable object in the face of a desperate, flailing storm. His expression remained completely deadpan, betraying absolutely no intimidation. When the threat of professional ruin completely failed to move the equerry, panic began mixing with the anger in Tom's eyes. The invincible shield of his mother's title wasn't working. He was losing control of the narrative, and he was losing it in a room full of the most powerful people in the country. Desperate to crush the resistance, Tom reached into his tailored jacket, pulled out his mobile phone. Fingers flew across the screen. He loudly announced his intention to contact Queen Camilla directly. The plan was violently simple. Get an immediate, blistering sovereign intervention on speakerphone. Force the Queen to verbally annihilate the Major in front of the entire staff. He never got the chance to press the call button. In a flash of pure, instinctual tactical response, Major Thompson closed the final inch of distance. He reached out. He physically confiscated the device directly from Tom's hands, hung up the call mid-dial. The screen went black. The silence that followed was deafening. A senior equerry felt it was absolutely necessary to physically take a mobile phone away from the Queen's adult son to prevent a subversion of the official state apparatus. That's not standard protocol enforcement. That's a raw emergency response to an active threat. Thompson held the phone by his side. The message was brutally clear. There would be no back-channel rescues, no maternal interventions. The rules of the firm apply to everyone. The confrontation escalated from a tense standoff into absolute administrative chaos. The physical confiscation of the phone severed Tom's lifeline, but it didn't extinguish his defiance. The staff in the room were now caught in a terrifying crossfire. The whispered back-channel directive from Queen Camilla demanding the front row was directly clashing with the meticulous, unyielding enforcement of the king's official plan. Courtiers traded frantic, terrified glances. Security earpieces crackled with static and hushed, panicked updates. The room turned into a pressure cooker. Tom continued to resist, digging his heels in, his voice rising as he shouted that he would absolutely not be moved by mere servants. Servants, that single word exposed the entire underlying psychology of the Parker Bowles faction. It revealed exactly how they viewed the elite professionals who dedicate their lives to keeping the monarchy functioning. Just obstacles. Help to be pushed aside. Major Thompson realized the situation was spiraling beyond the scope of quiet diplomacy. He raised his hand and gave a sharp, definitive signal to the royal protection officers stationed at the perimeter. The heavy hitters, the men trained to physically eliminate threats to the crown. As the security detail began advancing on the premier seating section, the atmosphere in the royal enclosure became suffocating. The meticulously planned schedule was literally seconds away from a catastrophic public implosion. And then the heavy oak doors of the royal enclosure swung open. The timing was almost cinematic. At the exact moment of maximum humiliation, as the protection officers closed in on the Queen's son, Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, made their formal timed arrival. The temperature in the room dropped to absolute zero. The frantic buzzing of the security radios ceased. The terrified whispers of the courtiers vanished. The sheer gravitational pull of the future king stepping into the room paralyzed everyone in their tracks. William's eyes immediately swept the scene. He took in the displaced chairs, saw the aggressive posture of the civilian entourage, saw his trusted major holding a confiscated mobile phone. He processed the entire catastrophic breach in a fraction of a second. Tom Parker Bowles, visibly disheveled, flushed and realizing his coup was collapsing in real time, made the worst possible tactical decision. Rather than displaying shame, rather than attempting to quietly de-escalate and slip away to avoid the wrath of the heir to the throne, he tried to double down. He sloppily attempted to reassert his perceived status. In a jarring violation of every single boundary of royal decorum, Tom tried to address William as his brother. He loudly complained to the Prince of Wales about being mistreated by the staff. The room held its breath, because what William did next would determine whether the ancient hierarchy of the British monarchy would hold, or whether a civilian family had just successfully rewritten the constitutional order in front of the world's eyes. That's where we'll pick up in the next part of this story. But before you go anywhere, make sure you're subscribed to Prime Royal Central, because what happens when William responds is something the palace tried desperately to keep quiet. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you think William said to Tom in that moment. Tom Parker Bowles looked directly at the future King of England and claimed that the Queen's family was being treated like common intruders. He actually demanded that William intervene, demanded that William overrule his own equerry, humiliate the security detail, and restore the civilian entourage to the front row where they supposedly belonged. He genuinely believed that the illusion of blended family warmth would force William to side with him to avoid a scene. Prince William did not argue, did not raise his voice, did not engage in a debate about family dynamics or modern hospitality. He did not utter a single syllable. William simply stopped, his jaw clenched, his face hardened into an expression of absolute terrifying steel. This was not the smiling, approachable prince of the public engagements. This was the raw, unyielding authority of a future monarch defending the absolute sanctity of his bloodline's constitutional duty. Beside him, Catherine remained perfectly poised. Her face was a masterclass in elegant calmness, a flawless mask that betrayed zero internal panic. But her eyes were completely locked onto the security detail. The silent communication was crystal clear. William looked from Tom's flushed, demanding face to Major Thompson. He gave a single imperceptible nod. One nod. No words, no negotiation, no compromise. That micro-movement was a death sentence to the Parker Bowles dynasty's ambitions. The message was unmistakable. There would be no salvation, no special dispensation, absolutely no tolerance for civilian overreach in his court. The protection officers moved with terrifying efficiency. They did not gently guide Tom by the elbow. They gripped him firmly. The physical contact was undeniable and absolute. The Queen's own son was bodily grabbed and pulled out of the premier section. The sheer humiliation of the moment was staggering. He was not treated like a VIP guest. He was treated like a trespasser who had breached a highly secure military perimeter. They dragged him out of the royal box entirely, past the terrified courtiers, past the empty stolen seats. They cast him into the rear corridors, aggressively removing him from the official spaces before the gates could open to the outside world. The physical extraction was swift, silent, and brutal in its finality. Now here's the thing that saved the monarchy from a PR catastrophe. The global press corps was literally seconds away from turning their massive high-definition telephoto lenses toward the royal box. Had the extraction taken even 30 seconds longer, the defining image of the year would have been the Queen's son being violently thrown out of Ascot. The catastrophe was contained by a razor-thin margin. The premier seats were immediately secured. The visual hierarchy of the British monarchy was violently preserved. But the explosion was just beginning. While Tom was being shoved into the shadows, the shockwaves of what had just happened were already racing through the palace communications network. You do not physically assault and remove the child of a reigning queen consort without triggering an immediate catastrophic war. Whispers raced down the back corridors. Messengers sprinted toward the private holding suites. Deep inside the complex, sitting in her meticulously prepared dressing room, Queen Camilla received the news. The detailed report of the brutal extraction, the confiscated phone, the total humiliation of her bloodline, and worst of all, the single silent nod from Prince William that authorized the entire physical takedown. Her reaction was not sorrow, it was absolute white-hot fury. A fury that was about to shatter the fragile public facade of the entire royal family and force a historic constitutional crisis right in front of the watching world. So if you're following this story and want to see exactly how Camilla tried to fight back, make sure you're subscribed to Prime Royal Central. Hit that like button because what happens next is something the palace desperately tried to keep buried, and you need to hear every detail. The private holding suite of the Queen Consort is usually a sanctuary of absolute calm, a fortress of perfectly regulated temperature, hushed voices, and meticulous preparation. But as the frantic messenger crossed the threshold, carrying the detailed report of the physical extraction unfolding just yards away, that sanctuary shattered. The news did not simply arrive, it detonated. The detailed account of the brutal eviction, the confiscated mobile phone, the total inescapable humiliation of her bloodline, and the most chilling detail of all, the single silent nod from Prince William that authorized the entire physical takedown. Her reaction was not sorrow. It was white-hot, unadulterated fury. Behind closed doors, the atmosphere turned instantly toxic. Queen Camilla and her closest, most trusted advisors circled the room, vehemently dissecting the catastrophe. They branded the Prince of Wales and Major Thompson as excessively sensitive, dangerously rigid, and deliberately harsh. The perspective radiating from Camilla's office was entirely rooted in a carefully constructed narrative of modern hospitality. Their argument was that during a period of immense vulnerability, while King Charles battled severe health concerns and underwent grueling medical treatments, the presence of a unified blended family was not just nice, it was essential. From her viewpoint, bringing her children into the visible premier spaces of the monarchy was not an institutional power grab, it was a crucial emotional anchor for an ailing sovereign. It sounds entirely reasonable, a family supporting each other during a health crisis. But the traditionalists operating inside the palace saw through the emotional camouflage. They saw the motive. They recognized the calculated manipulation of the king's vulnerability to achieve a permanent alteration of royal precedents. The immediate goal of the queen's camp was retaliation. Her advisors drafted a swift, uncompromising demand for an immediate formal apology from the Prince of Wales. They demanded Major Thompson be severely reprimanded for his aggressive handling of the situation. The demand was sent down the corridors, effectively a royal ultimatum. The response from Prince William's camp was terrifyingly simple: silence. There was no apology, no negotiation, only the cold, unyielding reality that the future king had drawn a line in the sand and he would not take a single step backward. The rejection of her demand was the absolute breaking point. Realizing that her back-channel directives had been utterly overridden and that she had lost the tactical high ground, the Queen made a decision that sent shockwaves through the entire royal apparatus. She abandoned her post. In a move never before witnessed in modern royal history, the reigning Queen Consort walked out of the Crown's most important annual social showcase. She did not wait for the scheduled departure time, did not politely excuse herself. She ordered her motorcade immediately. The sudden unscheduled exit threw the entire afternoon into absolute administrative chaos. Staff scrambled frantically to arrange the cars. Security details were forced to rapidly alter their exit protocols. By suddenly fleeing, Camilla effectively withdrew her presence from the official proceedings to signal a deeply personal grievance. It was a massive, visible declaration of non-cooperation with the future king, and worst of all, it left the monarchy entirely exposed to immediate damaging speculation at the exact moment it needed an image of ironclad stability. The void left by the Queen's sudden departure was massive. The grandstands were packed with thousands of spectators. The global press corps had their lenses trained precisely on the royal box. Rumors began swirling through the elite crowds as the glaringly empty seats became visibly apparent to the cameras. Whispers of a colossal internal fracture started to echo across the manicured lawns. This is exactly where Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stepped directly into the crossfire. While the internal machinery of the palace was spinning into a frantic, hyperventilating panic, Catherine displayed a level of flawless psychological discipline that essentially held the entire public facade of the monarchy together. She understood the assignment. She recognized instinctively that her primary constitutional duty in that precise, fragile moment was damage control. She had to prevent the world from seeing the deep structural cracks rapidly spreading through the royal foundation. As the Queen's retinue hastily fled the grounds, creating a vacuum of authority, Catherine deliberately drew the absolute attention of every television camera. She did not look distressed, did not look angry. Her face was a mask of serene, untouchable elegance. Watch her movements closely. She engaged warmly with the racing officials, smiled effortlessly at the guests. maintained the traditional slow rhythm of the afternoon, as if nothing extraordinary had just occurred merely feet away. Her graceful demeanor was not an act of submission. It was a highly strategic, calculated shield, a shield specifically designed to minimize the immediate media damage and buy the palace communications team a desperate window of time to lock down the narrative. But do not mistake her calm public diplomacy for neutrality. Catherine completely shared her husband's profound disgust regarding the unauthorized elevation of the Parker Bowles family. She agreed entirely that the front row must be preserved exclusively for the working corps. But her tactical execution was vastly different from William's instinctive hardline aggression. William was prepared to let his cold fury burn the bridge. Catherine focused entirely on long-term survival. She knew that open, visible conflict on the world stage would permanently scar the prestige of the crown. She held the line flawlessly. The media captured images of a radiant princess, completely oblivious to the civil war raging behind her. But as the afternoon faded and the immediate public crisis was narrowly averted, the battle moved from the public eye into the heavily guarded war rooms of Buckingham Palace. And behind those closed doors, a new, far more terrifying figure was preparing to enter the fray. When Princess Anne gets involved, the entire atmospheric pressure of the monarchy shifts. She is not merely another relative harboring a personal grievance. She is the ultimate uncompromising keeper of the institutional standards, the living embodiment of the discipline left behind by her mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II. And to Princess Anne, the events that had just unfolded at Royal Ascot were not a simple family squabble. They were an absolute sacrilege. Royal Ascot had been deeply cherished by the late Queen. She viewed it not as a playground for social climbing, but as the premier showcase of royal duty and structured, unbreakable hierarchy. To allow civilian relatives with zero official standing to physically displace working royals was, in Anne's view, a direct, unforgivable insult to the 7 decades of public service her mother had established. The Princess Royal did not hide her profound fury behind polite diplomatic phrasing. She entered the crisis like a calculated strike force. In a series of high-level, extremely tense confrontations deep within the palace walls, Anne openly targeted the senior courtiers and advisors attached to the Queen's office. She did not raise her voice to a scream. She used a tone of cold, piercing, absolute authority that cut through every excuse they offered. Witnesses describe a terrifying dressing down where Anne explicitly stated that the actions of the civilian entourage were an unacceptable, dangerous breach of decorum. One senior advisor attempted to intervene, citing the king's need for family warmth. Anne immediately shut it down. Her counter was blunt and devastating. The family's current internal challenges required more discipline, not less. Bringing non-working individuals into the symbolic center of the institution was a toxic precedent that would inevitably erode the structural integrity of the crown itself. With Anne lending her immense, unassailable moral authority directly to William's cause, the power dynamic inside the palace violently shifted. The traditionalist faction now possessed a decisive, overwhelming advantage. The Queen's advisors could no longer dismiss the eviction as youthful oversensitivity. They were facing the united, ironclad front of the heir to the throne and the most respected working royal in the nation. King Charles III was completely backed into a corner. He had spent months attempting to maintain absolute neutrality, desperately trying to keep the peace between his wife's ambitions and his son's rigid enforcement of protocol. But neutrality was no longer a viable survival strategy. The public walkout, the physical removal, the furious intervention of his own sister, the private dispute had mutated into a significant institutional crisis that threatened to completely derail the stability of his reign. He was forced to act, and the action he took was devastatingly permanent. By the first days of the following month, the monarch officially instituted a highly restrictive administrative policy that sent shockwaves through the entire establishment. It became known within the inner circles as the slim-down mandate. This was not a polite suggestion, it was codified royal law. The new decree explicitly dictated that only official working royals, Individuals who have taken formal constitutional oaths and dedicated their lives to state service are permitted to occupy the core symbolic spaces of the monarchy. Premier locations: the central rows of the royal box, the balcony of Buckingham Palace, official state portraits. All of it was now strictly, legally reserved for the working core of the family. The mandate effectively dismantled the entire strategy of gradual integration. It ensured in writing that civilian relatives would never again be permitted to displace the official representatives of the crown. But the mandate did not stop at seating arrangements. The king directed specific, targeted punitive measures directly at Tom Parker Bowles. For months, Tom had utilized his maternal connections to elevate his public profile, acting as a frequent unauthorized commentator on national television. He had been quietly leaking intimate updates about the king's health and internal palace logistics. It was a deliberate strategy to position himself as a royal insider. The new mandate severed that connection completely. The royal orders imposed an absolute, non-negotiable restriction on Tom's media access. He was explicitly forbidden from discussing any aspects of royal health, palace logistics, or institutional policy on any public platform. If he spoke, he would be publicly disavowed. This swift intervention successfully stripped him of his perceived status, brutally reinforcing the heavy steel door between the royal institution and the Queen's private family. Yet the king's final move was the true bombshell. To ensure this type of infiltration could never happen again, King Charles implemented a rigorous mandatory new approval process for all future royal guest lists. He officially decreed that the office of the Queen Consort must submit all proposed invitations for non-royal family members to a higher authority for final review and consent. And that absolute final authority was handed directly to the Prince of Wales. Think about what that means. Every single guest Camilla wants to bring into the royal spaces now requires William's personal approval. The man who ordered her son physically removed from Ascot now holds veto power over her entire social operation within the monarchy. It was the ultimate institutional checkmate. William didn't just win the battle, he won the war and rewrote the entire rulebook in the process. The Ascot incident wasn't just about a seating chart, it was about who controls the future of the British monarchy. And in one silent nod, one brutal extraction, and one permanent mandate, the answer became crystal clear. The civilian dynasty's ambitions died that afternoon in Berkshire. The traditional hierarchy was preserved, and the future king sent a message that will echo through the rest of his reign. Protocol is not negotiable, bloodline is not transferable, and the crown bows to no one. If this story opened your eyes to what really happens behind palace walls, subscribe to Prime Royal Central right now. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you think about William getting veto power over Camilla's guest lists, and I'll see you in the next one, where we dive even deeper into the royal scandals they don't want you to know about.